Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, Ethan.
Hey, Pete. Welcome back.
How's everything going?
Everything is great. And I think we have something really unique today because usually when a show comes out or a new movie comes out, you and I are trying to coordinate seeing it at roughly the same time. And then one of us has to, maintain strict confidentiality so that we don't ruin it for the other person. But in a beautiful twist, yesterday evening, within a few hours of each other, both you and I saw Uncharted.
That's right. In a very decidedly empty theater, by the way.
How many people were in your cinema?
I think, all in all, there were... in my row, I was the only one. There were two, maybe three people behind me, and in front of me, there was four people.
Oh, man.
That's it. And what was hilarious? The last 5 minutes of the movie, three people walked in, sat down, realized they were in the wrong theater, and then stood up and walked back out.
Huh. Well, I've got you beat. I was the only person in my theater, which means it was no longer a cinema, it was a private screening.
Ooh, la-dee-da, Mr. Moneybags in Dubai.
So, I didn't have anyone disrupting me. I can't blame anyone if I didn't, see something or catch something. It would only be due to my inattention. So, tell me, what's your first impression? What'd you think of it?
So, I went into the theater expecting not a good movie, and that's on me. I shouldn't have done that only because...
Yeah, that's on you.
We should try to be more neutral, but, let's be very frank and honest. Video games haven't typically had the best of representation on the big screen, right?
Yeah,
Most
true.
Movies based on video games are absolutely terrible.
Yeah, true.
But I have to say, I liked it. It was, or let's put it this way, it was an enjoyable romp.
Yeah, I think that's the right level of enthusiasm. I had, we'll get to this later, but I didn't have any expectations because until you told me, I didn't realize that Uncharted was based on a video game. I thought it was just kind of this Indiana Jones wannabe type movie. Tom Holland was, trying to do something other than Spider-Man. Mark Wahlberg, who still seems to be interested in cashing a paycheck, regardless of the level of effort or enthusiasm he puts into movies, was there. And I thought it was just, those two, and it was going to be kind of a buddy type Indiana Jones. But the same as you, I think it was definitely an enjoyable romp, as you put it.
Yeah, I think it's funny you bring up Indiana Jones because, of course, Indiana Jones gets name dropped.
Yeah.
And, this... I don't want to call this a genre of film because it's not, but, I think a lot of movies try to recapture the joy and the excitement that Indiana Jones brought when we first saw it.
I'm happy you used the word joy because... there's a lot of positives about this movie, including some things that I think are potentially iconic. But I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of joy. And to be honest, I pinned that on Mark Wahlberg, who I thought just didn't give a whole lot of... he wasn't very inspired, I didn't think.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of many movies where he is very inspiring. Don't get me wrong, I think he's great. I think he does action very well. He's obviously, very fit and capable. But, I don't think of him as, an A-tier actor in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Certainly not for a drama role. Definitely for any kind of action movie. I'm surprised he's not in any of the Fast and the Furious movies. I feel like he'd fit in that mold very quickly.
Yeah. It's interesting. Even on the movie poster, Tom Holland has... he appears on the left. He's got the first billing. He's definitely the larger star. Although in this movie itself, Wahlberg's character, Victor Sullivan, is kind of the main character, right? And Tom Holland's Nate Drake. comes in a little bit late as a more junior person.
Ish. I think the way I see it is it's more like a mentor-mentee relationship, which is what it was in the games as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, the idea has always been that Nate doesn't have a father figure or an older brother figure in his life because, his parents are gone from the scene, and his brother has also been
vanished
or has abandoned or whatever it is. Let's do it now. Spoiler alert. So his brother we thought was dead, but obviously isn't.
Yeah.
We don't see him in the movie at all, but he's brought in a very quick blink and you miss it moment at the very end of the movie, which obviously was, them setting up the sequels. Right?
So there is going to be so let's put this into perspective with the game. I understand now that this is kind of like a prequel to the game, showing how Nate and Victor, first teamed up together. Is that right?
Kind of. So don't hold me to anything because I didn't play all of the Uncharted games. In fact, I think I only played through half of one of them, and I don't even know which one it was.
Okay.
But my understanding from the general reviews online and, the general comments in the gaming community have been that what they've done is they've picked bits and pieces of the action sequences from the different games and put them into this movie. And Uncharted as a game hasn't been known for its narrative structure, right? It's not it's not a game that you have to play because it's got a fantastic story. I think what Uncharted did, which at the time very few other games had done, is they built a game around set pieces.
What does that mean?
So I think the developer said, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if we could have our protagonist running and jumping off of a string of cargo boxes off of a flying airplane and then has to jump back into the airplane? Wouldn't it be really cool if our character was stuck in an airtight room, and water is quickly filling up the space and he has to escape in the last couple of seconds? And then they built a game around that. I don't think they actually built a story and then said, okay, let's put some perilous situation into that's organic. The game felt like a series of set pieces that you went from A to B to C.
So these scenes in the movie are actually taken from the game itself?
So again, because I haven't played all of them,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there are 4 games out in all, plus a bunch of DLCs and expansion packs. But I know for a fact that there's that sequence where, you see Tom Holland, the opening sequence, and which is kind of like a flash forward.
Yeah.
Where you see him hanging off of a cargo plane, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's from one of the games. I'm pretty sure I've seen it in one of the game reviews and in one of the videos for games.
So I have to say, if we can go back to that opening scene, which you mentioned is then reiterated, kind of mid-movie. I thought that was that's not the first time that they've done it, right? I mean, it's not something totally unique in cinematographic history, but I thought that's a pretty cool thing where you open with a very good action sequence. And then you flash back to the beginning, and then, you kind of reintegrate that sequence from a different perspective and summarize it a little bit, within, the body of the movie. I thought that's a very, very cool tactic, and it's something that I definitely I've seen before. I can't remember when, but I thought it was a pretty good play.
Yeah. Again, I liked the film because it was a fun and enjoyable movie. Do I think it's going to win any Oscars? No. Do I think it's going to win any awards? Absolutely not.
But Pete, let me ask you. You said it's fun. Did you laugh at all during this movie?
No, not really. Really.
That's a problem because even in Indiana Jones, I can't remember what exactly, but I felt like there are a few funny things in Indiana Jones. And this was a movie that I felt should have had, one of my friends, I asked her about it, and she compared it to Jumanji. She said, if you like Jumanji, the one with The Rock and Kevin Hart,
Jack Black,
Kevin
Hart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She said, if you like Jumanji, you'll like this movie. And that was amazing recommendation to me. I love Jumanji. I thought Jumanji was laugh out loud funny. It was, of course, a little bit goofy and silly, but I thought that was laugh out loud funny. Uncharted was more serious, but I didn't think there was a single scene that I laughed. And that's okay if it's a true, action film. And if you compare it to something like Red Notice, which didn't know what it wanted to be, I thought this was a very, it was very loyal to its, what it tried to be. It didn't try to be too many things. It was a serious, kind of adventure film, and it stuck to that pretty well. But I didn't laugh at all.
I think that in terms of your friend's comparison, I think that's pretty apt in the sense that not necessarily in terms of the tone of the movie, but in terms of let's say the genre of the movie, which is action, adventure, right? And less on the comedy, I think. There were times where Mark Wahlberg tries to bring his humor into it, which sometimes falls flat. But I think the reason it's not as ha-ha funny is because that's not what even the game is about. The game is a little bit more on the serious side. Right? Yeah. So I think tonally, it's not a comedic movie. Almost more aligned with National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, Diane Kruger.
Oh, you brought in Nicolas Cage. I knew that would happen.
Well, it wouldn't be a Films and Stuff episode unless Nicolas Cage was mentioned. But
thank you, Pete.
in that sense, which is to say, National Treasure wasn't a funny ha-ha movie either, or it wasn't meant to be. But the difference was, they had a dedicated, quote-unquote, sidekick character whose job it was to be was the comic foil, right? He was the guy who was supposed to...
There's no third wheel here. There's no third wheel.
There is a third wheel, but she is not funny.
No.
Right?
Sophia Ali.
Her role isn't there to be funny. Chloe.
Yeah.
Her role isn't there to be... isn't to be funny there. And Mark Wahlberg, also more of a mentor than he is a comedic sidekick. Right?
Yeah.
And again, Tom Holland, charming guy. Do I see him as Nathan Drake from the games? Not at all. But do I see him as Nathan Drake in this movie? Yeah. Kind of. And I get the feeling that he also got really jacked for this role.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like he was much bigger in this role and much more muscular than he has been in the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I have to say, I thought that Tom Holland played a very good role to, you still see some of his boyish charm and that innocence, which has kind of become his trademark in Spider-Man and the Marvel universe. Yeah. But I thought that you mentioned that he got pretty jacked for this. And also he added this element of kind of a historian, and it seemed like he did some of his own kind of stunts, which shows off his kind of like dexterity. He's an athletic guy. I thought it was a good role for him to not completely reinvent himself, but to just remind audiences of what they liked about him, but also distance himself a little bit and say, hey, I can do things other than Spider-Man. And I thought this kind of historian adventurer was a good role for him. But I thought that I wish it would have focused more on his brains, to be honest, because I thought that there were like some fight scenes where he's definitely not a fighter and he's not a big guy and he doesn't really have any, I guess, training with like firearms and stuff. So I was happy that they kind of limited his exposure to this kind of stuff, but he was really the historian in my view. And I thought that he played that, pretty well.
Yeah, I think that you raise a really good point. So in terms of career, moving beyond Spider-Man, there were definitely action sequences in this movie where you're just like, oh, I saw him do that in Spider-Man. Oh, I saw him do that in the Avengers. Because, especially when he's flipping around the cargo boxes trying to get back on the airplane, you see elements of Spider-Man in him, in his athleticism, right? Yeah. But like you rightly said, you also see that he's moving beyond that, right? And I think that's this is a great transition movie for him in that regard.
I agree. There's so let me tell you what two things I saw that I thought were like really, really iconic. And one of them has to do with the character Braddock. Yeah? Tati Gabrielle.
Okay. Yeah.
So who I never saw in anything, and I was second screening looking her up. She went to the same high school as Tom Holland's girlfriend.
Zendaya?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
I don't think that's a coincidence. But I thought she was an iconic bad girl.
Yeah, it's a shame that they killed her. Or maybe they didn't. To be honest, in movies like this, you can never tell. And same with video games. You don't see her explicitly die. You just see her in the water and a boat drops on her.
Yeah. Is Braddock from the game itself?
I can't remember. Okay. Honestly, that's how generic the video games were. Excellent action sequences, a lot of fun to play, but in terms of narrative, I don't even know what they were trying to do. I know that they were looking for some kind of treasure, and that's it.
I thought the name Braddock sounds like a bad guy. Just the one word. I loved it. I thought her hair was something super unique and had a very bad guy element. And I thought she had just the right amount of, she didn't have like a machine gun. She just had like this short little knife. I thought she was an exceptional bad guy. And when we're talking about like female bad guys, not sure if that's the right terminology. I have to say, I thought it was iconic, and I'm not sure if I could name 5 that were better than her in the history of cinema. I thought she was a very, very good villain. Maybe not bad guy. It's probably villain, right?
Yeah.
So I thought she was an exceptional villain. I thought the role of Chloe, which I understand is intended to be loyal to the game with all this backstabbing and double crossing and so forth. I thought that was a very hard role to follow and probably a very difficult role to play. But the other iconic thing I thought about this movie was I thought that helicopter scene I thought was super cool.
Yeah, I must give them credit because that was quite epic to have two 14th century or 15th century ships being carried by 2 helicopters and then them battling in between. I thought that was great. Yeah. I thought that was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that was a very good scene. I mean, you kind of were worried about the ships, and at the end, the ships obviously were destroyed, which is too bad for historians and Magellan lovers. But I mean, I thought the types of the helicopters, I mean, they were obviously like these cargo types, that have kind of that carved out hull where they can carry things. I thought that was just a super, super cool scene. I thought the fighting on board the ships was a little bit, it wasn't.
Generic.
Yeah, it was generic. I think that's right. But I mean, just the idea of the 2 helicopters kind of chasing each other and outmaneuvering each other, I thought that was pretty iconic, to be honest. And I think you summed it up, which is based on where this ended, it seems to be setting itself up for a sequel. Based on the amount of open seats in your cinema and my cinema, I'm not sure that there's demand for a sequel, but for sure it's kind of set itself up to be that if it wanted.
So I can caveat that by saying, of course, we're both seeing it a week after the official release. Right? Maybe that's one reason.
A week?
If you look at
I mean,
yeah, look, I understand. I agree.
But a week?
Yeah, I know. I get it. But that's one potential explanation.
Let me just push back on that a little bit. There's nothing else in cinemas. I mean, where I'm living right now, if you've got a second choice to see right now, let me know. There is nothing in the cinema for me to see. So
the second choice is Spider-Man. So it's either way I'm seeing Tom Holland.
Which has been more than a week. Yeah, you're right. So,
I mean, say what you will, at least right now, 2022 seems like it's the year of Tom Holland, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I thought it was good fun. It did give me moments of wow, like I've never seen that before on screen. I thought that was great. There were some elements that I didn't think were fantastic, but overall, I must say I did enjoy it. And in terms of, a video game movie adaptation, I don't know how faithful it is to the video games.
Yeah.
But I also think that, most video games shouldn't be too faithful on screen because otherwise you end up with, cinematic turds.
Yeah. I mean, what would you think is the next? I mean, because now we're actually seeing cinema emulating gaming, right? So if you're looking at this as a trend, I mean, what games have been? I mean, we've had Resident Evil. What else is out there? Mario Brothers. Okay, cartoon wise, Mortal Kombat. What's kind of next? Do you think for a video game? I mean, Witcher's gone to television, right? Which is another string.
Oh, Sonic the Hedgehog.
The Hedgehog. Yeah, but again, more aimed at kids. What do you think is next? I mean, what's available out there? Because I never heard of Uncharted before this. What video games are out there that you think are then going to be,
I can tell
prime
you,
for a
I can tell you Halo. No, the TV series comes out next month.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I believe on Paramount Plus.
I did not know that.
Same network as Yellowstone. So that comes out, I think, next month. Don't hold me to that, but it definitely comes out this year. The trailer came out. They've made a few, bombastic statements about it. But that's been in the works for a long time now. Okay. And what other video game movies?
I don't know.
Oh, Tomb Raider we've seen.
Yeah, we've seen Tomb Raider.
Assassin's Creed we've seen.
Assassin's Creed, yeah. I mean,
there was that arcade game that The Rock did with the giant gorilla. That was horrendous.
Oh, yes. It was not just a giant... Was it the giant gorilla, the giant alligator, and the giant something else, right?
Yes, and I don't know what. I think it was based on Rampage, but
yes, it was wrong. Rampage. You're right. It was Rampage in Chicago. Okay. Yeah, that was super horrendous. I agree.
Though there was another terrible. The Doom adaptation was also horrendous.
Oh, I didn't even see that. I thought it was so bad.
Hitman was out. I'm just looking it up now. That was also okay. Nothing great. Yeah, I mean, look. Here's the problem. Video games, in terms of IP, are valuable. But when you try to convert that IP from a video game to a movie, I think you have to do something which is, hey, we like the idea of this character. We like the world that this character is in. We're going to make a fresh movie, not based on the game. I think the problem is video games themselves are built so that you can have a narrative structure over 8 hours, 10 hours, 40 hours of gameplay, right? Yeah. So you can do a little bit of a slow burn in terms of developing a story. Yeah. Trying to condense a 40-hour game into a 2-hour movie, you have to cut corners, and that generally will make a movie very bad.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, so one of the things I thought was the purpose of Uncharted, the movie, was, again, to provide backstory and show, how Nate and Sully, teamed up together. And I think that's a very appropriate way to, to frame, the IP of a game around a movie is to, have kind of a prequel. It may limit what you can do after that, but I mean, at least it gives you, something that's a little bit different, but you're still, trading on the goodwill of the game title itself.
Right.
But that doesn't work for everything. So, I mean, for example, if there were a Fortnite game, I'm not sure how that would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about it.
But if there was a Fortnite game that showed how the island was created and what is the backstory of the bus dropping people, which, to be honest, we've seen in some other things like Hunger Games, for example, and that other Japanese film. That would at least be kind of a more interesting prologue. Is it prologue? Prequel. In terms of how this was created, and they say, oh, that's super cool. Now it goes into the game, and now we can play the game separately.
I think that's probably also a good way of thinking about it, is to say, hey, let's make movies that based on this video game, but as companions to the video games, not as replacements to the video game.
Yep. Absolutely right.
When you do that, so you can say, hey, I've watched this movie, so I can now play this game,
Yeah.
or I've played this game. Where does the game move forward onto that? Let's see it on the movie. That's fair enough.
Oh, Pete, you just made a genius statement, actually, which is if you're looking at this as a franchise, then what you should be doing is you should be having game and then a movie to show the transition to the next game, right? So
and this is kind of what the Star Wars universe does, right?
Yes.
Or at least the Disney Star Wars universe.
Yes.
I think before Disney acquired it, when it was just George Lucas at the helm, I think he had this idea, but I don't think he was able to execute. Whereas I think with Disney now, they've said, look, we've got cinema as a platform, we've got television as a platform, we've got video games as a platform, we've got books as a platform. How do we integrate in a more seamless structure? Yeah. And that's kind of what you can see, right? And it adds value to the franchise because now you're not just a series of movies that you can see on the screen, but you can be like, okay, I'm going to go home, I'm going to watch the TV series.
You're right.
Oh, I'm going to go, and then I'm going to go sit on my Xbox or my PlayStation and play for a few hours, and that entire story continues.
Yeah. So like, for example, Call of Duty, right? Which is beyond popular as a game. Do you play Call of Duty?
No, I can't stand it.
Oh, okay.
It's very popular. I fully agree, but I think it's not for me.
We can cross Call of Duty off. We can cross Call of Duty off as a potential sponsor thanks to that.
Yeah. EA, do not call us.
Can't stand it. Okay. Brought to you by EA Sports. Okay. So, but that would be something that would make a little bit of sense, right? If there's so many Call of Duties, but if you've got like Call of Duty Black Ops, right? Game's super popular. What's the next one that's going to be, released? And then you have a movie that shows, this special task force that's being redeployed for this other mission. Then you've got the next Call of Duty released. I agree. That's a very clever way to kind of integrate cinema and gaming without stepping on each other's toes or, having a storyline that, doesn't make sense. But you're a big gamer. You're a bigger gamer than I am. I mean, almost all the games I play are based on recommendations from you or otherwise. What are you playing now that you'd like to see made into a movie? Or what are you playing now that you don't want to be made into a movie?
Well, so that's the thing. I generally don't think that any video game should be made into a movie. Again, I don't have a problem with you using video games as a starting point or as, a base. But I think that the problem is that video games, generally speaking, or at least the best of them, have a good narrative structure. And that narrative structure is based on the fundamentals of a video game, which is to say, hey, you're going to be sitting and playing this game for the next 40 hours or 30 hours or 10 hours. It's very hard to distill that over a 2-hour movie. Right, and I think this is one of the reasons why The Witcher, and I'll caveat this 100%, Witcher was based on a series of books, which then became a video game, which then became a TV series. But the reason I think the TV series also works is because it's 10 episodes. It's 10 hour-long episodes. It's not 1 2-hour movie. If you tried to make Henry Cavill do a 2-hour movie of The Witcher game or the books, I don't think it would be good. I really think what the movie guys would end up doing, the writers would end up doing, is taking 5 or 6 stories and trying to jam that into 1 2-hour movie, and it would just be a muddled mess. I think the true test of time, or not time, the true test will probably be, I don't know when it's coming out, I think it's later this year, if not next year, Borderlands. Great video game series, franchise, well, relatively great. Starring Kevin Hart, Jack Black.
Oh, really?
Jamie
Kevin
Lee
Hart
Curtis,
and Jack Black again, huh?
Is it going to be good? I don't know. Do I expect it to be good? Absolutely not. Will I watch it? Of course I will. Because
yes, I will.
that's what we do here.
Yeah. But what do you think of okay, Borderlands is a good one. I mean, what about some of the other ones that people are playing, like Far Cry, for example, Gears of War, No Man's Sky, Elder Scrolls, Titanfall.
So No Man's Sky doesn't have a story or doesn't really have a narrative element to it. So making a game out of it, making a movie out of it, again, not difficult because you can impart whatever narrative you want onto it.
Yeah.
But maybe not necessarily the most fun element either. It's just about you traveling in space. Far Cry could potentially be good. It would probably be something that's a little bit more like a guerrilla style movie where you have one guy versus one government and then bringing it down. That's typically how it's been. Most of the Far Cry games are about one character bringing down one X, and that X is either the government, or it's a militia, or it's a religious cult, or it's a bunch of drug smugglers, whatever it is, So it's one versus a group.
What about Red Dead Redemption? You love that. I love that.
I thought it was a very good game.
Could that be a series? I mean,
I don't want to see it. I think the game was so good. I think Red Dead 1 and 2 were so good.
Yeah.
And especially as a narrative structure, like I wouldn't want them to even bother.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, it almost has to go as a standalone TV series, or it needs to somehow, I agree, offer some different narrative. Especially for Red Dead Redemption 2, you're right, has such a strong narrative that it doesn't really make sense to try to recreate that. It's not going to be faithful. But do you play these on Xbox, or you're on PC, right?
Yeah, actually, this is a good segue. We can talk about this a little bit. So Xbox is my personal console of preference.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, these days, Xbox versus PlayStation is similar to iPhone versus Android. That argument, And I think it's one of those things which is, what ecosystem are you a part of and what do you want to be a part of? And stay with that.
It's changing, though. I mean, we should talk about that, but I mean, it's changing, right? I mean, because now publishers that's one of the big things when I first got an Xbox, it was not a difficult decision because Xbox, PlayStation, basically, despite, people being passionate about one or the other, it's more like, what are your friends on? And to be honest, like, what console do you like better? What controller do you like better? Yeah. For me, I chose the Xbox because I just kind of I felt the controller was like a little bit more comfortable for me, and I felt like I could, manipulate the buttons better. That was it. But the games were the same. Now, obviously, things are changing. Microsoft is acquiring Blizzard?
Oh yeah, Activision Blizzard. Yeah. I mean, that's just to name a few, but they've been on an acquisition spree in the last, let's say, 2-3 years. I think Microsoft has bought. So they started off buying like 5 to 10 smaller studios, and everyone applauded them because they were kind of like indie studios, excellent games, but really small, not big market splashes.
Yeah.
And then last year, Microsoft, absolutely destroyed expectations. They went out and bought Bethesda. We know them primarily for the creators of being the creators of Fallout and Elder Scrolls. And they bought that company for $7.5 billion, and people lost their minds. Right? They lost that because they're like $7.5 billion. And Xbox said, "Hey, we bought this. They're our studio now. So guess what? Now all Bethesda games are going to be exclusive to Xbox."
What's on Bethesda?
All Bethesda games.
That's not Overwatch. It's not Overwatch. It's not World of Warcraft. What's
No, that's Activision Blizzard. So everyone thought, okay, well, that was the end of it. And then maybe a month ago, Microsoft said, hey, I guess we're still a little bit small. We're a tiny, struggling company. So we're going to spend $70 billion and we're going to go buy Activision Blizzard. And they blew everyone's mind with that. So now they've got World of Warcraft, one of the most successful MMOs, massively multiplayer online games in the world. They've got Call of Duty.
Yeah. So Activision is Call of Duty.
Activision is Call of Duty.
So does that mean that they're going to change Call of Duty so you can only play it on an Xbox? Or are they not so silly that they're going to basically cannibalize half their target market?
So when they first bought the studio, my feeling was that they would not, that they would do that. I thought that they would say, hey, if you want to play Call of Duty, you're going to only you're going to only get it on Xbox. But I think what Xbox has done is with this is now they've made a couple of statements to say, hey, we're not really about exclusives to consoles.
Yeah.
What we want is to have as many players as possible.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing that because the reality is that Call of Duty and games like that are multiplayer games.
Yeah.
And if you cut off your user base by 40, 60, 80%, whatever that number is, you also lose that revenue.
Yeah.
Right? Because Call of Duty now makes a lot of money from games like Warzone, which is like this, which is like Apex Legends or Fortnite, this battle royale game, which makes them millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, through microtransactions. I think what Microsoft's big play at the end is going to be, hey, PlayStation, if you want Call of Duty on there, no problem, but you need to have Game Pass onto your system. And Game Pass is Microsoft's version of Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
It's a streaming service.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't ever have to buy individual games now. You buy the subscription, you pay $10, $12, $20 a month, and you get all the games that are on the system or the games that Microsoft puts on the system. And I sneakingly suspect they're going to go to Sony and say, we're more than happy to let you continue having Call of Duty and World of Warcraft on your system. Hey, we'll even throw in the Bethesda games. But you need to let us put Game Pass on your system, and you need to let us charge your consumers $20 a month so that they can get access. Otherwise, thanks but no thanks. If you want to play those games, buy an Xbox.
Before I ask the next question, who is bigger, Microsoft or Sony?
Oh my God, Microsoft by a landslide.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think they spent 3 times Sony's market cap just on acquiring Activision Blizzard.
Okay.
So but it's bigger only because it's Microsoft. They're not just about games, right? If you look at the Microsoft gaming division, that's much smaller.
Okay, so that was my first question. My second question is, what is left then if Sony wanted to do likewise? What's the next target for acquisition?
So what's hilarious is a few weeks ago, Sony purchased Bungie for $4 billion.
What's Bungie?
Bungie, creators of Halo, but of course Halo, the Halo IP belongs to Microsoft.
Yep.
So they bought the company that made Halo, and they bought the company, and they make Destiny. That's pretty much the only IP they have right now is Destiny. Of course, I'm sure they're working on other games. That's fine. So everyone was like, oh, this is a retaliatory move. But, you and I both know in the business world, acquisitions of any size, whether it's $4 or $4 billion, it takes months of time, right? Yeah. You can't just say, oh, well, my competitor bought Y, so I'm going to buy X. It doesn't work that way. You have to spend time and effort. So I think this was something that they had in the pipelines for a long time. It just happened to coincide with the fact that Microsoft had announced, and just the timing worked out in their favor. So it seemed like it was retaliatory, but it obviously isn't. And Sony's gone out of their way to say, hey, we're not going to make this an exclusive. All Bungie games will be on all platforms.
I mean, do I need a console anymore? I mean, I've got Xbox. What do I have? I've got Xbox One, right?
Yeah, you have the One X.
Yeah, I've got the One X.
So that's the last generation console. Yeah. That's the one I have as well. And I think if you ask Microsoft, they will tell you don't need to buy another console again. Microsoft's game plan has always been Game Pass. Or at least now, I believe it's always been Game Pass, which is to say, hey, we're a streaming gaming service. We will offer you all these games as long as you have a strong internet connection, a screen, and a controller or a keyboard. You can play our games anywhere. You can play it on an iPad. You can play it on a tablet. You can play it on a computer. You can play it on a phone. It doesn't matter. As long as your internet connection is good enough and you have a way to control your character, you can play it anywhere. And for me right now, this is very much the same situation where you had Netflix versus Blockbuster.
Whoa.
15 years ago.
Did you really call that out? You just called out Netflix versus Blockbuster? All right. Tell me where you see these parallels.
If Sony doesn't get its act together on the online streaming platform, you are losing out on the convenience factor that Microsoft brings in now. Because Microsoft is going out of its way to say, hey, we are gamers first. We don't care if you're buying an Xbox or a PlayStation or an iPhone or an Android. We just want you playing games. And we're offering you a very cheap way to do that, which is, here's $15 a month. You get our entire library of games, so you don't have to pay $70 or $80 or $50 per game that you own. Who cares? Because that ownership structure is going the way of the dodo, right? And we've seen that in movies. I really cannot remember the last movie I purchased, because with all these streaming platforms now, I don't need to purchase anything.
Well, I mean, maybe that makes sense. And it's still hard for me to wrap my head around Microsoft being, like a forward-thinking company. But I agree, like they've kind of taken that step, which is, they're all about the intellectual property. They're all about the game titles. They're all about publishing games and making sure that people,
it's a software play now. This is all about IP and software, which is something we're also seeing in the movie and TV arena, right? Because let's be very, very honest and practical. The hardware differences between the current generation PlayStation 5 and the current generation Xbox Series X is so small. That gap is so small that it's almost negligent. You have different controllers, sure, but in terms of actual hardware capabilities of pumping out games onto your TV screen, they're both not the same, but they're essentially the same. The gaming experience is virtually identical. So I don't need to worry about spending $500 on a Series X or $500 on a PlayStation 5. I don't need to break my head about it. I think Microsoft is saying, hey, just play games.
So that's interesting, but I guess what I'm not sure about, or I'm not clear about, is how we're going to see new intellectual property developed. What I mean is, in films, what we've seen is that there's a very clear preference for cinemas or for Hollywood producers to make something that is an existing title and make endless number of sequels, or make these universes that just kind of expand and play off of each other, right? And we see that, either the films follow video games, or in some cases, like Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Batman, Lego, the video games are, capitalizing on the films. But what do you think is going to be the way that new titles are introduced? Because we can't continue to play Call of Duty endlessly. We can't continue to play Doom and Fallout.
That's why I don't like EA.
Yeah. So
it's nothing new. I think where we're going to see that change is through independent developers, or indies as we call them.
Do they have enough? I mean, making a game though is so difficult now. I mean, not just
but it doesn't cost anything. The difference is that, right? Making a movie is not an easy task for anybody, right? If you and I decide we want to make a movie, it's going to be an expensive feat, and more than that, it's also going to be a very logistically difficult thing to do. But, if we were both programmers, and if we sat down and decided, hey, we want to make a game, we have a good idea to make a game, if we knew how to do the actual legwork of programming, it wouldn't take anything but time, right? On a very base level. Yeah, if you look at the most basic movie and the most basic video game, I think the barriers to entry to making a video game are far lower than the barriers to entry of making a movie.
I don't know, but I see your point. I mean, I guess I see your point. I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, maybe that's right.
At some point, the market's going to correct.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to be happy about playing Call of Duty 48 or whatever comes out next.
Yeah.
And they're just going to be like, well, where can we look to getting new IP that we really like?
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be sick and tired of Halo 14 or Uncharted 7 or whatever, the serialization of video games. It's the same thing that we see in movies. When people get tired of it, independent developers will be there who are like, hey, I've created this new video game, give it a go.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's what we're going to see. I think the market is going to correct if it hasn't already.
I mean, are you playing any of the, the massive multiplayer games, just kind of like the open environments where you can do anything you want. You can just take your own planet and you can develop what you want. Are you playing any of these?
Not really. Not really. I've played a few of them in the past. Like I tried No Man's Sky. I did like Red Dead Redemption Online or Grand Theft Online, whatever it is. The GTA version of the online. I've played all of them. They're fine and they're fun for the first few days, but then beyond that, move on. Nothing that makes me come back day after day after day.
Maybe we need a films and stuff galaxy where we can create our own little galaxy and theater and something where we've got, stadium seating for all of our fans and listeners to watch us and join us. Maybe that's what we need.
I will be right now there to tell you that if we're doing something in the metaverse, I'm out.
Why?
I am out. As profitable as it could be, it's just, it's not my thing.
But this is where everything is going to, right? Which is you and I. I mean, right now we see each other and we hear each other, but isn't the next stage you and I are interacting as our avatars, and all of our fans and listeners are watching us and interacting with us as their avatars, right?
You're not wrong. I agree with you. I think this is where we're going. I don't like it, but I think this is where we're going.
But you saw Ready Player One. I mean, I think we talked about this, and you and I were like, I mean, at least I was just like beyond thrilled with it, right? I mean, the book, of course, is better than the movie, but the movie I thought was just wow in terms of visualizing what society is heading towards, right? I mean, it essentially depicted the metaverse before the metaverse was even a thing.
Right.
And that's essentially, when you look at it through that prism, I didn't have such a negative view towards it. I could see the positives. I mean, it's definitely not a substitute for, in-person meetups and, being a social person. But in the absence of living in the same place, in the same area, it's at least a substitute, whether as an avatar, whether as, some type of, holographic image of yourself. At least it's a substitute, for interacting and having the feeling of physical proximity, right?
Yeah, I suppose. You're again.
Yeah. I think it depends how you use it.
Because yes, and I think that the reason I don't like it is because I see it as a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And I don't think it takes much of a push for us to get from there to where Ready Player One's dystopian future was.
But do you think where do you think the risk is? Do you think the risk is in basically humans becoming too lazy to interact physically? Or do you think the risk is that organizations seek to, like, for example, employers say, hey, forget it, no more office. Don't even come to the office. We don't want to see you. We don't want to rent space. Everyone just meet virtually in this conference room. And that's the substitute. And they're basically forcing everyone's hand to interact like that in the name of cost cutting or efficiency. Where's the risk driver in your mind?
So take that scenario and build on that. Because if they're ready to save costs that way, right? How else can they do that? The problem is that corporations are inclined to always maximize their profit, right? And that's their role. And this isn't a slam against capitalism. That's just the role of a corporation. So you have to build on that and say, hey, okay, now that we've got you out of the offices and we're saving, 50% because we don't have to pay rent. Mm-hmm. Hey, because you don't have to commute, we're also slashing your salaries 40%. And because, your costs are also going down. That's what I mean by saying it's a slippery slope, right? And then how long before someone says, hey, by the way, we've signed a sponsorship deal with Gatorade. So every 30 minutes, you're going to see on your visor an ad for a Gatorade.
Well, we haven't done that to our employees yet. And I think we can also promise our listeners we're not going to make them watch Gatorade advertisements.
That's right.
Although it's making me thirsty.
Gatorade, if you're listening, we're open to smoke.
Activision, apparently we are not. But Gatorade, yes. Hold on. Pete, there's something important we did not do because we went off on a slight tangent after Uncharted.
Oh my God, we didn't rate
we have
Uncharted.
to give a rating to Uncharted.
So where do you stand on this?
Mine is wait. That if you go to a cinema, you will not feel as though you burned your money. The value is there, but certainly you're not missing out by not going to the cinema to see this movie. My recommendation, wait until it comes to whatever streaming service you have. Watch it in the comfort of your home. I think it's better.
Again, because I'm going to give the movies the benefit of the doubt, I actually think mine is a go to the cinema and watch.
Wow. I didn't see that coming. I
know I sounded down on it.
You sounded down on it.
If you look at the movie like a National Treasure or like an Indiana Jones or like Jumanji, I think it's a fun romp. And I think if you just don't overthink it, I actually think you'll walk out with a smile on your face, much like I did. I still had low expectations, but they handily beat it.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'm expecting a sequel. Although, I do you know anything about how this has performed at the box office?
It did really well in the States on the opening weekend.
Really?
Yeah, I think it made like $50 million, I think, in the first month. First weekend, I think.
So, let me ask you, that is competing right now with
nothing.
Death on the Nile?
Yeah.
Marry Me?
Yeah, I think there's a movie with Channing Tatum.
Dog?
Something Dog? Yeah.
It's just Dog. Black Light? Liam Neeson?
Yeah, this is not competition. This is not none of those things that you've mentioned so far is a blockbuster movie.
I agree.
None of them, and very few of them have the star caliber to dethrone the combination of Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, Tom Holland is definitely the bigger star now. Antonio Banderas is now kind of just a bit actor, although he still plays that role well. But Mark Wahlberg is probably historically the bigger name, but his star has just fallen.
But only because he's been around for a long time.
Yeah, only because he's been around. But I have to say, there's something not uncomfortable, but you know, Mark Wahlberg's not so old that he should be calling Tom Holland kid. You know, I just found like there was this not frostiness, but it just wasn't, you said it was joyful. I found that there was just a lack of joy and enthusiasm in this movie. And that's one of the reasons that I think that you can wait for it to come out, is that I just didn't find that, unlike all the different Indiana Jones films that just seem to have like this air about them, you know, whether it was, you know, fun or danger or true adventurism, I found that this one just was a little bit too clinical and missing a little bit of oomph.
Yeah, I think
like Kevin Hart, you know, when you see Kevin Hart and The Rock together, those two play off each other very well, right?
Yes.
Like I mean, their synergy is like just exceptional. And maybe it's hard to expect that. But Holland and Wahlberg, like, you didn't really get that.
But I think that falls a little bit more on Wahlberg.
Yeah, I agree.
I
totally agree.
I'm trying to think of what actor has worked with Wahlberg that the chemistry has been equally good. Maybe Alec Baldwin and Mark Wahlberg in The Departed. I think they worked well together.
So, you know,
but that was because they both had pseudo comedic elements to them.
But, you know, Wahlberg is a little bit of a lone wolf. And his most iconic roles, he's, you know, known as kind of the broody loner, you know?
Yeah, so again, in the Uncharted universe,
Like Transformers? Yeah, like Transformers, he was not at all compelling as a scientist, father of the girl, right?
yeah.
You remember that?
Again,
Stanley
I do.
Tucci. The Tooch was in that as well, remember?
The Tooch was in that. Look, I still liked it only because it had elements of things that I like, which is it had globetrotting, it had, interesting, unique locales.
Yeah.
It had great action sequences, like with the two ships in the midair.
Braddock. I thought Braddock as the villain. Exceptional villain.
Great villain.
Yep.
Great villain. I don't know. It worked for me. I think it worked for me on that regard. I think it would have worked better if it weren't necessarily, bagged down by the video game franchise.
Yeah.
But overall, I think for me, for example, I think that's why National Treasure did better than, for me personally, than Uncharted, is because there was no source material behind it holding it down.
Do you think that it needed to go into the orphan with the nuns, and then they're separated? I mean, did you think that this was like kind of a fabricated pull on the heartstrings that wasn't really necessary? It could have been, I thought, kind of recreated in a more organic way, other than just, kind of Sully manipulating, Drake's character, saying, "Hey, if you come with me on this adventure, we may find your brother." Like, no, I won't. What? He's just like sitting on the pile of gold? No. You think that was unnecessary?
I don't think it was unnecessary. I think first of all, it was only like 3 or 4 minutes in the movie, not too much time. It set up the plot of the movie it set up the MacGuffin of the movie.
What's the MacGuffin here?
The
crosses?
The gold.
Keys.
The gold.
Okay.
Right? The treasure, right? The thing that they're chasing after. So it sets up that, and and it gives you just a little bit of backstory, which is fine. It's fine. Do I think they needed it? No. Do I think it hurt the movie? Also no.
There's one scene I just remembered as we're finishing up where I did laugh. And that was when Tom Holland was fighting this Scottish like bodyguard. And the guy was speaking in like a very thick Scottish accent. And Tom Holland was like, "I honestly have no idea what you're saying." That was a very good example of the type of humor that can be incorporated into an action adventure movie without being, silly and undermining the character's strength, right?
Yes. And going along with
it needed more of that. It needed more of that, I thought.
Yeah. It needed a few more of those snakes. Why is it always snakes?
Yes.
Kind of element to it.
Yes, exactly. You're right. A couple more of those, and you'd have something more like Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah. And again, only because there wasn't a specific character designated to comedy.
Yeah. Usually there's a Jack Black, the
some
fat
foil,
historian.
Right? Jumanji.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Jumanji, it was Jack Black. In
or
National
Kevin Hart.
Treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but exactly. But what I'm saying is, like, between Kevin Hart and Jack Black, it's going to be Jack Black, right? So he's the guy who's the physical comedian. He's the guy who's the funny, he's like, "Oh, I've been transformed into a girl."
Yeah.
Or not a girl, sorry. I'm a pretty girl that's been transformed into, a rotund short man. You know what I mean? So
all right. Maybe we'll see it in the sequel.
Indeed.
Pete, I think that's all we've got time for today, right?
That's it for today.
Okay. Can we give a sneak peek of our next episode? What are we focusing on next time?
Sports movies, right? I think because right now we've got a lull in the box office. We've got a lull on the TV landscape. So maybe we can talk about our favorite sports movies and reflect on what makes them great.
Never a bad time for that. I will see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.